I wish you were never born. 5 words. That's all it took to freeze me solid, colder than the January wind whipping across the empty parking lot. My teeth started chattering instantly, not just from the biting cold outside the beat-up Ford Pinto, but from the chilling finality in her voice. Sarah, the woman I knew as my mother, didn't even look back as she slammed the car door shut, the rust-eaten metal groaning in protest. Cracked asphalt
7 years
of a
old,
truck stop
standing
outside
alone
Flagstaff,
on the
Arizona, watching the only safety I'd ever known accelerate into the darkness. I clutched the crumpled piece of paper she'd shoved into my hand moments before. My small fingers were stiff, making it hard to smooth out the hastily scrawled message, written in the shaky cursive I recognized from grocery lists. It read, "No one's child. Good luck, Ethan." Apartment in Chandler. Before that night, Sarah
had been
worked
a series of
cleaning
dull
jobs.
routines
I went
in
to
a cramped
school.
earhole.
We ate microwave dinners and watched reruns. It wasn't perfect. Sarah had always been jumpy, prone to sudden fits of temper followed by tearful apologies. But it was stable. It was mine. The shift had started about 6 months prior. The apologies vanished. She stopped touching my hair when
Strict
she
order
walked
not to
past.
answer the phone.
She began disappearing for
When
hours.
she was home, she was
sometimes
often on the
days,
phone in
leaving
hushed,
me with
angry
a stack
whispers,
of canned
always
soup
ending
and
the
calls with the same agitated energy. "I told you, they'll never find out," she'd hiss, before noticing me watching and snapping, "Go to your room, Ethan." The final journey had been abrupt. 3 days on the road, driving north, Sarah silent except for the endless chain smoking. When we finally stopped,
pine.
the air was sharp and
She pulled
thin,
me out of the car,
smelling of diesel, handed me the note, delivered those 5 brutal words, and left me shivering beneath the flickering yellow light of the truck stop sign. Panic seized me, a physical clenching in my chest. I sat down on my small duffel bag, pulling my threadbare winter coat tighter, trying to rationalize. Maybe she just forgot something. Maybe she was getting gas. But the roar of the Pinto's engine had faded completely and irrevocably, swallowed by the desert exactly night.
as the note described.
No one's child. Hours passed, marked only by the arrival and departure of massive 18-wheelers that shook the ground when they idled. My tears had long since frozen on my cheeks. I was contemplating trying to sneak into the brightly lit diner when a sound ripped through the quiet despair. A sound that wasn't the slow drone of trucks, but a guttural,
moment later,
terrifying
a massive
roar,
Harley-Davidson
like pulled into the parking space directly in front of me. It wasn't the bike that froze my blood, though. It was the man sitting on it. He was enormous, easily twice the width of Sarah. His face was mostly obscured by a thick, dark beard braided with small silver beads. He wore a heavy leather vest over a black long-sleeved shirt, and the patch stitched onto the back of the vest.
He reeked of smoke,
winged skull,
oil,
was something sharp and metallic. Even in the E, he looked like the kind of person parents warned their children about, the kind of dark legend that haunted the edges of small towns. He cut the engine, the sudden silence deafening. He didn't move for a long minute, just sat there, scrutinizing me with eyes that seemed too sharp, too intelligent, for the brute appearance. "Kid," he rumbled. "You look like you're waiting for a bus that quit running
like
5 years ago."
shifting
in a riverbed. I couldn't speak. I could only shake my head, clutching the note tighter. He swung his heavy leg over the bike, pulling off his black helmet. He had a deep scar running from his eyebrow down to his jawline. He knelt down slowly, his leather jacket creaking. I braced myself, expecting a threat, a demand, or maybe just indifference. Instead, he looked directly into my eyes, then something shifted in his recognition. "What's your name, son?" he asked, softer this time. "Ethan," I whispered, my voice cracking. He nodded, a slow, deliberate movement. "Ethan, that's what I thought. Look, kid, I don't know who dropped you off here, but let me tell you something important. It's about that piece of paper you're squeezing the life out of." He paused, desperately, glancing at the name on the note. "She left me." "Sarah, right? Said I was
Your
no
mother."
one's child." I nodded. The biker, whose massive forearm bore a tattoo of a complicated Celtic knot, sighed, a sound heavy with regret and anger. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a worn, laminated photograph. It was a picture of a beautiful woman with fiery red hair standing next to a man who looked like an impeccably tailored version
Rook
of the biker himself.
and Sarah,
he
minus
said,
the
tapping the
scars.
photo. They
She
were
isn't
holding
your
a baby
mother,
swaddled
not your
in a
real
blue
mother.
blanket.
Your real mother was
My
Clara.
name is, and she loved you more than the next breath she took. My brain struggled to process the contradiction. This terrifying, scarred man on a motorcycle was telling me my entire life was a lie. Clara was my sister, Rook continued, his voice hardening with professional certainty. And
Husband
that woman
Daniel,
who just
back in
left
San
you,
Diego
Sarah,
7 years ago.
she worked as
She
a
didn't
nanny
leave
for
you
Clara
because you
and
were
her
no one's child. She left you because you were someone's child, Ethan. Someone she stole. He leaned closer, his eyes intense. Clara and Daniel never stopped looking. And I haven't either. They put this club, the whole damn network, on alert 7 years ago, searching for a kidnapped baby named Ethan. I recognized
Birthmark
you
right under
instantly,
your left
Ethan.
earlobe.
You have your
Clara
father's
used to call
eyes,
it her tiny kiss.
and that faint.
I involuntarily reached up and touched the mark. The cold, the fear, the abandonment. It all suddenly crystallized into a furious, sharp pain of betrayal. I wasn't abandoned, I was found. Sarah wasn't my mother, I repeated, the realization hitting me with the force of a physical blow. Rook stood up, adjusting his heavy
Made the biggest
jacket.
mistake of her life,
No,
dumping
son,
you where I could
she
find
wasn't.
you.
She was
We're
running
getting
for a
you
long
warm,
time, but she
getting
just...
you fed, and then we're going to call the people who have been praying for 7 years to hear your voice. He looked down at the note I still held. You are not no one's child, Ethan. You are Clara's son. And now, you're coming home. He didn't offer me pity. He offered me the truth, and in that moment, the terrifying
cold still
biker
bit,
became
but
the
the
most
deep,
solid,
internal chill
safest
of
thing
utter
I had.
despair finally began to thaw. I knew with absolute certainty that Sarah was going to pay dearly for those 5 hateful words, and I knew exactly who was going to make sure of it. Rook, the biker, my uncle. He didn't offer me pity. He offered me the truth, and in that moment, the terrifying biker became the most solid,
Chill of
safest
utter
thing I
despair
had ever
finally
encountered.
began to thaw.
The cold
I knew
still
with
bit,
absolute
but the
certainty
deep,
that Sarah was
internal.
going to pay dearly for those 5 hateful words, and I knew exactly who was going to make sure of it. Rook, the biker, my uncle. Rook was a strategist disguised as a brute. He moved with a terrifying economy of motion. Within 48 hours, I wasn't just safe. I was
Contacts,
tucked into
silent
a small,
men who looked
clinically
like
clean
they'd fought
apartment
wars
above
in
his
places
machine
you
shop
couldn't find on a
complex
map,
outside
and they were
Tucson,
watching.
Arizona.
Sarah's
He had
calls started immediately. Rook instructed me to answer some, but only on speaker, and only if he was present. She didn't sound remorseful, she sounded calculating, like a chess player whose favorite piece had wandered off the board. Her tone swung wildly. "Ethan, honey, where are you? Mommy is worried sick," rested flinched,
reassuringly on
even
my
though
shoulder.
Rook's massive hand,
Mommy.
She hadn't used that word since I was 7, and she needed me to lie to a social worker. "I'm fine, Sarah," I managed, my voice thin. "Fine isn't home, sweetie. Those men, they're dangerous. They fill your head with nonsense. You know I love you. You are my boy." Rook mouthed the word
To contact
lie.
him, unless we
Before
initiate
speaking directly into
The
the
sweetness
phone,
vanished.
his voice a
The
low,
air on the other
gravelly
end of the
thunder.
line crackled with
"He is
venom.
not your boy, Sarah.
Who the hell are you?
He is safe.
You think you can just
And you will
kidnap my
not
child?
attempt.
I'll call the police, you psycho!
Do it," Rook challenged, a dangerous smirk playing on his lips.
Call them, and we'll have a conversation about emotional terrorism, statutory neglect, and the 20 years you spent erasing Clara's memory from her own son. We have
Line
time,
went
Sarah.
dead.
Do you?
That was the
The
last
E.
call she initiated. Rook explained that abusers rarely retreat. They escalate. They cannot stand the loss of control. He was right. Sarah started showing up at Rook's shop entrance, lurking in her expensive sedan, occasionally yelling at the guards Rook had posted, silent, thick-necked men named Diesel and Hammer. She was trying to provoke
But we
a
weren't
public
waiting for her to
scene,
make the next
trying
move.
to force me to run
We were
back
building
to
the
her,
case.
where the cruelty
Rook
was
knew that the
familiar
courts
and
often treat
predictable.
psychological abuse as he said, she said, unless the she said involves a documented confession or a physical threat. We needed her to confess the motive, the reason she had spent 2 decades telling me I was worthless and unloved. The inheritance. She needs to think she's winning, Ethan, Rook explained one evening, sitting across from me, polishing a knife that looked like it could fell a small tree. She needs to believe you're broken enough to forgive her if only she offers a crumb of affection. That's when she gets greedy, and that's when she slips. My stomach turned. The idea of deliberately placing myself back in her orbit, even for 5 minutes, felt like jumping into a pit of vipers. But the memory of those cold, dead eyes staring at me as she delivered the sentence hardened my resolve. You are no one's. What do you need me to do? I asked, my voice steady for the first time in my life. The plan was meticulous. We set up a meeting in a public, yet secluded area of Papago Park in Phoenix. I was to carry a small, military-grade recorder taped underneath my shirt. Rook and Diesel would be positioned far enough away to be invisible, but close enough to intervene if she tried anything physical. The day of the confrontation felt like the air before. Rook gave me a final instruction. Mention Clara. That name will always make her lose whatever semblance of control she thinks she has. I sat on a bench near a dry wash, waiting. When Sarah finally arrived, she looked dramatically frazzled. Perfectly manicured hair, slightly messy, designer sunglasses perched on her nose. She looked like a woman who had spent an entire day crying avoiding over a broken nail, not a missing son. Don't touch me, Sarah. Her facade cracked instantly. Her lips thinned. Don't be ridiculous. I know those barbarians have been poisoning you, but I'm the only one who truly cares about your future. My future? I echoed, deliberately injecting weakness into my tone. Is that why you told me I was no one's child? Because you care? Around the empty park, the question hit her like a physical blow. She leaned in conspiratorially, her breath smelling sickly sweet, like cheap perfume and desperation. You need to forget that, Ethan. It was a mistake, a moment of anger. Listen, your father, my husband, he left everything to me, legally. But if you come back now, I can talk to the lawyers. We can make sure you're taken care of, provided you stop talking to Rook and stop digging into the past, pushing the limit. Especially about Clara. She was my mother. You just wanted her inheritance, didn't you? The tripwire. That's why you got rid of me and pretended I was yours. To keep the trust fund clean. The mask shattered. Her face twisted into the familiar, ugly snarl I had seen 1,000 times in the hallways of our cold house in Scottsdale. Inheritance? She hissed, dropping her voice to a vicious whisper. Every syllable. But the microphone pressed against my ribs. Do you think I wanted your mother's pathetic savings? I wanted control, you ungrateful little mistake. I spent 20 years teaching you how useless you are, making sure you would never be strong enough to challenge me. She grabbed my arm, her grip surprisingly strong, digging her nails in. Your mother was weak, and you are weaker. You think Rook can save you? You're still just a little abandoned boy, Ethan, shaking and you will never get a control completely gone. The years of suppressed rage, the sheer narcissistic pleasure she took in my suffering was pouring out. I ruined her life, and I made damn sure I ruined yours too. I told you you were no one's child because that is exactly what you are. You are an inconvenience, an expense. The pain in my arm was minimal compared to the agonizing clarity of the truth. It wasn't just financial gain. It was motivated, calculated malice aimed at isolating. Fell over us. Rook was there, materialized seemingly out of thin air, his face a mask of cold fury. He didn't speak. He just placed his hand on Sarah's wrist, not grabbing, just pressing, and the pain instantly forced her to release me. She stumbled back, recognizing the end of her reign. Her eyes went wide, shaking, not with fear of him, but steady. But with the dawning realization of what she had still blinking green what she had just my shirt. Confessed. The final piece of the puzzle, the irrefutable evidence of her wicked design, was captured. My heart hammered with a grim, sickening triumph. She had finally given us the rope, and I knew, looking at the silent promise in Rook's eyes, that we were about to tighten the noose. The long nightmare was finally violent for a full minute. The long nightmare was finally the realization sank into her eyes, but the war was not. Deep, drowning horror
as she recognized the silent, damning truth hanging between us. She had just laid out her entire plan, her cruelty meticulously detailed, thinking she was speaking only to me, a beaten man she believed incapable of fighting back. Rook, bless his cold, pragmatic heart, reaching up to his second button just on my loud shirt, enough to shatter the faint warmth of the tiny digital recorder beneath the fabric. I nodded almost. I gently pressed the power button, securing the file. Witness protection file 003. Complete. I think, I said, my voice steady despite the tremor in my hands. We're done here, Eleanor. Her face, usually a mask of brittle perfection, crumbled, scrambled for the elegant facade melted away, leaving only the panicked, ugly creature
Done with
underneath.
what, Jensen? Are you finally admitting you need help? I told you, I'm just trying to...
Save it, Rook cut in, his voice deep and absolute, stepping fully into the light. He wasn't subtle. He was a wall of muscle and grim intent. The performance is canceled. We have everything we need. Eleanor flinched, recognizing Rook, friend, the former detective I had hired, opened her mouth to scream, she had tried so but hard I was already walking past her, heading straight for the door. We left her standing there, paralyzed by the sudden, irreversible defeat, stranded in the mausoleum of her own making. We didn't look back. We didn't need to. The drive across Chicago to Rook's secure office felt like moving through thick syrup. The confession played on a loop in my mind. The casual
professional
malice,
reputation
the
dry,
detailed planning
of
of how
corporate
she
fraud,
intended to
just to
bleed
secure
total control over the assets and our daughter, Chloe. It was always Chloe. She's clever, Jensen, Rook said later that night, hunched over his computer, backing up the audio to 3 separate servers. She built a paper trail intended to look like yours. Poor planning, reckless spending, bad investments. The confession is the motive, the part of the nightmare I dreaded most, the physical invasion of what little sanctuary I had left. This was. Eleanor had been relentless in the weeks leading up to the recording. Her behavior hadn't been merely suspicious. It had been surgically invasive. She'd insist on helping me reorganize my home office, her fingers hovering over files she'd previously ignored. She'd bring me coffee, always lukewarm, always insisting I drink it immediately, after I'd spent hours on a complicated to monitor my state of mind, checking if I was alert enough to notice the minute changes she was making to the digital documents. The worst was the way she weaponized my trust. One night, she came home with a small, beautifully carved wooden box, ostensibly a gift for Chloe's keepsakes. She made a show of placing it high on a shelf in Chloe's room, insisting it was too delicate for the child to handle yet. Chloe. We both knew I wouldn't touch anything. I can touch anything you love. Rook and I studied the confession again, cross-referencing her casual remarks with the timeline of her visits. She mentioned the contingency plan and the final key. We focused on the office, the place where she knew I'd be most vulnerable. The physical evidence has to be where she knew you wouldn't look, tapping but where authorities would instantly find it if she tipped them off, something she could access discreetly during her organizational trips. The next day, under the guise of finally cleaning out the cluttered storage room in the basement of our brownstone, the one spot she usually refused to enter, citing allergies, we began the true investigation. The room was dark, damp, and filled with the ghosts of forgotten projects. Christmas decorations tangled with old university textbooks being down there. It was, we worked slowly, methodically, focusing on the large industrial-grade shelving units I had installed 5 years prior. I remembered Eleanor watching the installation with an odd, calculating expression. "Look at the construction, Jensen," Rook muttered, running his hand along the metal frame. "These are anchored to the wall, heavy-duty." I knew where he was to tamper with its structure. She wasn't strong enough to move a whole shelf. My heart began to pound against my ribs, suffocating me. We started at the base, looking for loose bolts, fresh scratches. Nothing. Then Rook moved to the top shelf, reaching above the stacked boxes of tax returns and photo albums. He ran his hand along the recessed metal beam connecting the top shelf to the wall. He paused. "Feel this, Jensen."
My fingers brushed against
small
the
ladder,
cold, familiar
my breathing
texture of
ragged.
painted metal.
I reached into the
But then
dusty
they
void
encountered
above the
something
shelf.
foreign. A seam that wasn't supposed to exist. It was a panel, perfectly cut and magnetically sealed, disguised by the shadow and the thick layer of dust accumulated over years. I swallowed, the taste of copper rising in my throat. This was it. The dark heart of her deceit. Sickening pop. Rook handed me a slim
Inside the
utility
hollow
knife.
beam, wrapped tightly
Carefully
in a
pried
thick,
open
clear
the panel.
plastic sleeve.
It
was
gave
a bundle
way
of
with a
papers.
feint. They were crisp, official-looking documents. I pulled the sleeve out, my hands shaking so violently I almost dropped the precious, damning package. The first document I saw was a notarized letter bearing the forged signature of my business partner, detailing fictitious loan default clauses. Six-figure sums.
The second was a
being
complex
moved to
ledger,
offshore accounts,
meticulously altered
accounts
to
that
show
appeared to be controlled solely by me. But it was the third item that stole the air from my lungs and nearly sent me tumbling off the ladder. Tucked beneath the forgeries was a small, high-capacity USB drive, labeled simply, precisely, and with staggering indifference. Chloe's Education Fund, access keys. I stared at the label, planned to destroy the future of the one person I had fought so desperately. She hadn't just intended to ruin me, funding her entire fraudulent operation with the money meant for our daughter's college education. The shock wasn't just in the discovery of the proof. It was the chilling, stark realization of the absolute, boundless void where Eleanor's conscience should have been. The wickedness was not just a design. It was her defining characteristic. Grim. Rook reached up, steadying the ladder.
Her, Jensen.
His face. She just gave us the motive, and now we have the murder weapon. The cold, metallic click of the latch on the evidence box was the last sound I heard before the world went quiet. Rook stepped down, his movements heavy and deliberate, the box held like a sacred yet toxic relic. We were standing in the cramped storage unit in downtown Portland, the air thick with the smell of dust and old plywood. Call the prosecutor, Jensen, Rook instructed, betrayal, his voice low, almost reverent. Tell him we have the ledger confirming the complete liquidation of the college trust fund, dated 3 days before the company restructuring. And tell him we found the customized .38 revolver, registered in Eleanor's maiden name, tucked inside the old dehumidifier unit she insisted on keeping. The shock wasn't a sudden jolt. It was the slow, creeping paralysis of she had been systematically dismantling our future, piece by piece, to fund a lavish escape that required the complete silencing of anyone who got too close to her books. Starting with her business partner, Martin, whose death had been ruled an unfortunate accident. Eleanor hadn't just broken my heart. She had tried to erase my family's very existence, replacing it with a pristine, wicked facade. Running on pure, toxic adrenaline, 48 hours, focusing solely on protecting Lily. We left the house in Beaverton that afternoon. I didn't pack photos or memorabilia. I packed essentials and every single financial document I could find, treating the house like a crime scene I needed to evacuate. Lily, only 16, was shattered. She didn't understand the depth of the charges, only the sudden, brutal removal of her mother. Of the killing. I tried to shield her from the mother left behind was a physical presence in our small, temporary apartment in Seattle. The subsequent months were a blur of depositions, therapy sessions, and the sickening routine of rebuilding a life from scorched earth. I took a sabbatical from my own engineering firm. I couldn't focus on blueprints when the only structure I cared about, my home, had been built on a foundation of lies. A woman whose patience was the only boundless, helped me navigate the crippling guilt. How did I not see it? That was the loop that played constantly in my head. How could I have slept beside a monster for 15 years? Dr. Chavez gently corrected me. You didn't marry a monster, Jensen. You married a woman who meticulously concealed her monstrousness. Narcissists don't leave breadcrumbs. Every minor detail was plastered across the Oregon tabloids. The most with the public nature of the socialite killer, the college fund fraudster. We moved across the country, landing in a quiet suburb outside Denver, hoping the distance would buffer the noise. The move was essential. I needed to breathe air that Eleanor had never touched. The healing was excruciatingly slow. It wasn't just the grief of the lost marriage. It was mourning the potential
every
of the
vacation
life
photo,
I thought we
every
had.
shared laugh,
Was now poisoned by the knowledge that while I was genuinely happy, she was calculating. The discovery hadn't just exposed her, it had forced me to question my own judgment and sanity. The trial, held 9 months later in Multnomah County, was a brutal formality. Rook was magnificent, meticulous, laying out the timeline of the fraud, showing how Eleanor had systematically isolated Martin before eliminating him to cover the theft legally years prior to the hollow point shell recovered at the scene. The motive was clear, cruel, and entirely financial. Eleanor, dressed impeccably, sat at the defense table, projecting an icy, wounded dignity that almost fooled me one last time. When the jury delivered the verdict, guilty on all counts, including first-degree murder, unadulterated hatred burning in her eyes, a silent promise of eternal damnation. She simply met my gaze. That look, that final venomous clarity, was the true closure. It confirmed that the woman I loved never existed. The judge sentenced her to life without parole. Years passed. Lily thrived in Denver. She chose to major in psychology, driven perhaps by a deep need to understand the broken machinery of the human mind. Into the trust. The stolen college money felt secondary. Recovered during the liquidation. Lily had learned a far more important lesson: the cost of truth and the value of resilience. I started dating again, cautiously, years later. It was terrifying. Every kind gesture, every thoughtful comment was subconsciously scrutinized for the faintest whiff of deception. But I learned that not everyone is a predator. Last spring, I learned that trust Lily once walk across the stage in can Boulder, be rebuilt, accepting her diploma. Brick by, I saw her strength, her intelligence, and the quiet compassion she carried, forged in the fires of our shared trauma. Rook, now a dear friend, stood beside me, nodding silently, knowing we had not only secured justice, but secured Lily's future. The darkness never completely leaves. Proof it leaves a that scar, you survived, a deep, winding. If there is one thing I want anyone reading this to understand, it's this. But scars are. Pay attention to the quiet whispers of your gut. We are often so invested in the narrative we want to be true, the perfect partner, the stable life, that we ignore the glaring anomalies, the inconsistencies in the ledger, the strange phone calls, the sudden, unexplained rages. Evil doesn't always wear a mask of lies while meticulously planning it wears the face of the person you trust. Never mistake comfort for safety. And never, ever assume that the bounds of human cruelty end where your love begins. The greatest monsters don't live under the bed. They live across the breakfast table. And sometimes they are calculating the exact moment to strike, using the very resources you dedicated to your future to fund their dark designs. Be vigilant. Your life might depend on it.